Hi everyone, it's Lainey. Welcome to the Doorbell channel. Today we're going to talk about 10 reasons why you need a contract. We talk about contracts a lot, and we always say when handling client issues, when dealing with sticky situations, when trying to answer tough questions, just refer back to your contract and the answers should all be there. So this is one of the things that really separates a business from a job, from a hobby, or what my parents call jobbies, which is somewhere between job and hobby. Creating a contract was such a daunting task for me. I put it off for so long, but once I got it done and got a lawyer to look over it, it actually was such a big weight off my shoulders because I knew that I was protected in case something crazy happened. And knock on wood, I've been so fortunate not to have to enforce my contract in any legal situations. But even without that, it's been so helpful to me for a million reasons. So without further ado, here are 10 reasons that you need a contract. First and foremost, a contract's purpose is to protect yourself and your property. This is probably the most important reason, to be honest, because if you're not protecting what you love, what you care about, what you've built, then you're being irresponsible as a business owner, you're being irresponsible as a parent, you're being irresponsible as a homeowner, all of these things. So you need to be able to protect yourself in the case of something bad happening. So number two is the other end of this, to protect your client. So your client is going to feel way, way better if they have signed a contract and they have something to refer back to for your policies and procedures. And while this is going to hold your clients to a certain standard, it's also going to hold you to a standard. So just make sure that you're fulfilling all of the terms and conditions that are in your contract, as well as making sure that your client is fulfilling those terms. Number three is actually my personal favorite reason for having a contract, and that is just to have something to refer back to. There is just nothing sweeter than answering a question with per the contract and then copy and pasting your terms and conditions. It's so easy for clients to try and take advantage of what's going on in the situation, or just to not understand the situation and what your terms and conditions are and why they are the way they are. But as long as you have the contract in place, you can always refer back to that. And it kind of makes it a little bit less personal. You're not personally saying no, it's more my policy is no. It's like when you're at Panera and they say that their company policy is a certain thing. You don't feel quite as offended as if the person just says, no, I don't want to help you with that. So I love having something to refer to. So number four is just that it makes you seem really official. So the first person who ever asked me for a contract was a planner. I had sent her a proposal and she said, okay, great, send over the contract and I'll get the client to sign it. I had no contract, so I just freaked out, stayed up all night Googling, looking at stuff online, trying to figure out how on earth to do this. And so I made it up. I just completely wrote it from scratch and sent it over to her. And months later, I told her about it. And it turns out that she was really impressed by that move and that I had the contract and she's dealt with people who didn't in the past. And that was one of the things that kept her working with me to this day. So honestly, having a contract is just going to make you seem official. It's just going to be another little formality step that makes you look like a real business, and clients are really going to appreciate that. So the number five reason for having a contract is just to outline your policies. In stationery, there are a lot of different things. So just putting all of that in an email and having to type that out a million different times is really tough. So it's really nice just to have the contract, and then the really important ones I can kind of mention in an email, like, hey, we require 20% extra. The rest of our policies are outlined in the contract. In a similar vein, number six is that your contract is going to outline your procedures for any discrepancies. So any kind of hiccup in the process, whether it's a delay on your part, a delay on the client's part, a delay on a manufacturer's part, something's out of stock, something isn't made anymore, gets discontinued. These are all the things you can refer back to your contract to figure out how to handle. And I have a great video on handling client issues that you can check out when you're done watching this one, which will go a little bit more in depth as to how to handle those without making it an uncomfortable situation. So our number seven reason that you need a contract is because it helps you collect payment. Money is always a tough subject, and sometimes it's a little tough to settle on everything, get all your payments collected. So having your contract outline all those policies really helps you. And if you can't automate some of these processes, like I do using Dubsado, if you want to use a discount code for that, 20% off your first month or year, you can use BYLANEY, that's BYLANEY. But it's all outlined in my contract first. So this is a great way to refer back if someone's missing a payment. And in your contract, I highly recommend putting something in there about what happens if they miss that payment. So say every day you're late is a $10 fee. That'll cover like rush shipping fees or things we have to do based on the fact that that client was late. Number 8 is another one we're gonna knock on wood about, because hopefully we don't ever really have to deal with this, but it limits your liability. So this has to do with protecting yourself and your property, but it's just limiting the amount that can be collected upon if something does go wrong. So for instance, if something happens to the invitations in the mail and they want to sue me because I completely ruined their entire wedding and they want to sue me for $100,000 because that was their full wedding cost, my contract is what's in place to prevent that from happening. So in my case, the max that I'll be responsible for would be the invitations or whatever's laid out in the contract, and there are certain things in place that will limit that liability as well. For instance, if the post office does something to ruin the invitations, then that liability is not on me as an individual or as a company. So in this way, your contract is kind of your disaster recovery policy, because it's going to prevent any kind of big giant emergency thing from bankrupting you or hurting your business in any irreversible way. Another one of my favorites is number 9, which is that your contract is going to help you set boundaries with your clients and also with yourself. This is similar to number 3, where it's something we refer back to or say per the contract. But what's great about this is it can outline policies such as that you don't work on weekends if there's a rush order, that you're not responsible for working them in. So one of my favorite examples of using your contract to set boundaries is a lesson that I learned the hard way in the past. I had a client who was about 3 weeks delayed on approving her print proofs, and I had been telling her the whole time that her suite would take 2 weeks to put together. However, because she was delayed, it ended up cutting into a 10-day vacation on my part. So I had given her a 14-day time period. 10 of those days I was on vacation. So I ended up having to pull all-nighters to get this invitation suite put together in essentially 4 days. So I was not a fun person to be around that week, but this taught me a great lesson, and I immediately put into my contract that if you delayed, even if it was 1 day on the front end, it wouldn't necessarily mean that your suite production was 1 day delayed on the back end. So what that clause does is allows me to keep the rest of my clients, the rest of my life at their regular pace, and if someone is late, then I don't have to work that in the exact same time frame that we had originally discussed. And your number 10 reason for needing a contract is that it just provides a paper trail. So I use Dubsado, like I mentioned, and each client signs that on the dotted line. I countersign it, so there's a date that they've seen the contract. I make them initial every single piece, and there's a couple pieces that I actually say, wait, this is important, read it again, and initial it again. So contracts are amazing for this because they provide a dated paper trail, especially if you're using a CMS system where it's all right there in one place. You can always find it. But even if you're using a PDF system, or even if you have physical paper contracts, this is such a helpful way just to ensure, like, if you do go to legal action, that everyone knows that that person saw this contract, read these policies on this day, you read these policies again, countersigned the contract on this day. And I have to say that you should be sending your contract on almost every single order. If you sell anything on a shop, then you may not be able to do signing and countersigning of contracts, but make sure all the terms and conditions are laid out in each listing so that everyone sees them. And then if you have something that you're going to print or provide proofs for, you can make that a contract in itself, so they have to sign off on all those terms and conditions when they sign off on their proofs. Even if a job seems a little small, still send out your contract, because this is going to separate you from those hobby businesses and make you appear way more legitimate. And then it'll also protect you in case anything negative happens. Knock on wood again, we hope it doesn't. But having the contract in place will just lighten your load a little bit. And if, like me, you work with other stationers or planners or intermediaries for clients, just make sure that the person who signs your contract is the person who's making those decisions. So for instance, if a planner wants to include stationery services in their package for their client, that's completely fine, but then all of my correspondence is going to be with the planner. I'm going to listen to the planner on all decisions, and they're responsible for checking on the info. They're responsible for misspellings, making sure the address list is correctly formatted, all those things, because they're the person that's on the contract and they're the person that's paying me. However, if they prefer for me to work directly with the client, then I need the client's signature on the contract, and the client needs to be the one paying me. So just make sure that you have that clear delineation, that the person on the contract is the person whose decisions you are listening to and the person whose opinions are getting heard in the conversation. Because if, for instance, the planner says, no, we want green envelopes, the client says, no, we want gray envelopes, you have to do what's on the contract because that's going to protect you in the future. And last but not least, you can write your own contracts. You can also buy some. The contract shop is a really great place to do that. I can link that below. But whatever you do, make sure you have someone who is in the field, is a contract lawyer. It's gonna cost money, it's gonna take some time to get right, but they will add some things in there or take away some things or change up your language in ways that will help you so much, and they'll make you feel so much better about things that you may not have even considered including in there. And of course, as per usual, make sure you subscribe to the Doorbell channel. Tell us what you thought of this video, talk to us about your contracts, and leave us a comment, share with your friends who may be starting a business as well, and we'll see you next week.